Welcome aboard the Fourth Watch, which is sponsored by the good people at the Fair Group, of which I, Ned Scarsbrick, your commentator, is a volunteer. So, what's on the topic today, Brother Ned? Well, one of the things I've chosen is to talk about the basic misunderstandings we encounter in the basic use of language. What? That's right. I know you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure that you understand what I really meant. There are some of us who just love to quote the dead prophets because they can't correct any misunderstandings we may have about what they were trying to teach. Well, this is what Brother so-and-so really taught about whatever. Well, some of these problems are caused by presentism. It can be easy to look down on what seems dumb, inappropriate, or just plain stupid. Why did they do that? That's not what we would have done. Well, duh. We didn't live in that culture. That's the way it was then. You think maybe those in the future will look down on us for this or that? I would think so. Which leads us to the next problem, idioms. No, not idiots, you dolt. Idioms, cultural idioms, symbolic representations of ideas, principles, concepts, and stuff for things. For instance, the lens of today's standards. Well, lens is not meant to be thought of as a literal lens, just a way to illustrate the way we would use to make a judgment. All right, how about a biblical idiom? 40 days and 40 nights. Moses wandered in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights till he came into the land of Midian. He spent 40 years there before the Lord called him to deliver Israel from Egyptian bondage. Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. All these are cultural idioms. 40 days could be 20 days or 2 months. 40 years could be just a lot of years. Doesn't have to be exactly 40 years. 400 years could be a lot of generations, not a literal 400 years. Kind of changed the meaning of things, doesn't it? It's kind of interesting. Okay, what next? How about homonyms? Words that are spelled the same but have different meanings depending on the context. Like bureau. Is that a government agency, a chest of drawers, or a writing table? The answer, yes, all three. Well, what about being saved? Well, that depends on what type of saved you were talking about. You Mormons, ask a simple question, get some indirect, deflecting answer. Well, words do mean things, but a whole lot depends on the context. Any excuse to avoid answering a direct question. No, that was actually a good answer. If you want to talk about details of things, we can do that. How about another idiom like skate? Is skate an activity? Is it an implement you put on your feet? Or is it a sea creature? Well, again, the answer is yes, all three. There are a lot of homonyms, and that's one of the problems we have with language, trying to understand what context is being used for a particular word. And then there's some people that try to use their knowledge and their understanding of academics to impose their own personal ideas. According to Bill Watterson, the purpose of academic writing is to inflate weak ideas, obscure poor reasoning, and inhibit clarity. With a little practice, writing can become an intimidating and an impenetrable fog. You ever read some stuff that you look at it and you go, well, what does that mean? Like, how about this grade school book report? The dynamics of interbeing and monological imperatives in Dick and Jane. A study in psychic transrelational gender modes. What a bunch of baloney sauce. And that's the point. Point? What point? The point is that we can use language to avoid a direct answer to a direct question by trying to sound professional. By the way, who is Bill Watterson? Well, he wrote the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes, and this is one of his better ones in my view. That's one reason I try to use simple words to explain just about anything. You're attacking academic scholarship. No, I'm not. I'm the first to admit that I know about zilch point squat about professional academics. The point I'm trying to make is that we all need to be aware that all language has limits in its ability to communicate just about anything. Oh, that's just great, Brother Ned. So how do we make sense of life? Well, let's talk about that. We need to be aware of presentism, idioms, homonyms, and acronyms. Isn't that right, Ace? Well, ACE is my assistant, and it's an acronym that stands for Audio Communication Engineer. Now, if you were not aware of that, ACE could be anything. It could be like an ace in a deck of cards. Could be a combat fighter pilot. Could be the American Council on Education. Could be some other stuff. I'm getting frustrated here, Brother Ned. Okay. Now, with all the problems trying to understand what's being said today, can you imagine trying to understand, now I mean really understand what happened 100 years ago? How about 1,000 years ago? What about ancient Egypt? Oh, like you understand hieroglyphics, huh? No, I don't. But I do know that there were 3 basic types of writing. First, what you just talked about, the hieroglyphics. Yeah, we all know that. There was also a script called hieratic that was developed around the same time. It was a cursive type of hieroglyphics or shorthand for the temple sacred writings. So you read hieratic, huh? No. Now, there was a third type of writing called demotic. No, not demonic. You see the problem you can get into here? Demotic was an even more cursive form of hieratic, used for public documents or merchants, regular language stuff. Oh, so you read demotic? No, I don't. But I do know people that do. The point is, there are different types of scripts. What about adding in idioms and homonyms? What if they use some common acronyms that we would have no way of understanding because we didn't live in that culture? Do Egyptologists all agree on translations? No, they don't. So are you talking about the Book of Abraham, Brother Ned? No, I'm not, but that's a good example, especially in the facsimiles. Now, when you look at the facsimiles, the translations that Joseph Smith put are not the same as some Egyptologists would interpret them. What about culture that was imposed upon these? Facsimile 1 is pretty much a scene about dying and preparing to die and what's going to happen when we die. Facsimile 2 is pretty much a representation of what we need to take into the next life when we die. And facsimile 3 is pretty much a representation of the final judgment and the heavens and that type of thing. That's the Reader's Digest thumbnail version. There are Egyptologists in and out of the church that have very direct explanations of what these things could mean in their culture versus what they mean to us today in our culture. Now, let's move just 50 years in the past instead of 3,500 years. Here are some common idioms of the time. Yes, Shodot and Shobido. I'm sure that must mean something. Shalal. Yes. Dulang. Yeah. Rat-a-tat, yeah. Ramalama Ding Dong? Oh, yes. Yeah, doo-bop, doo-bah. I'm sure that must have an explanation. I wonder what the saxophone in the background means. Interesting idioms. Cultural idioms. What does all that noise mean? Well, my wife had a good explanation. All of these nonsense terms mean the same thing. Good times. So if you lived in 1900, you would have no way of knowing what that music was about. I would venture to think that if you lived in the year 2100, all of this would just sound like some foolishness. Yes, a doo-bop, doo-bah, rema, lama, ding-dong. Yes, of course. Well, now there is one more type of scam, as I call it, that affects our understanding. The redefining of words, like marriage. Through the whole history of the planet, marriage has always been about a man and a woman being together. No one would ever consider otherwise. It's like saying trees are no longer really trees. Rabbits could be considered trees because they also lived in the forest. They're just as good as the traditional trees. No. You're just prejudiced against rabbits. They have the right to be called trees if they want to. No. You're just rabophobic. We here at Rabbits with Rights... Rabbits with Rights? This is crazy. No, that's just because you're a rabophobe. Rabophobe? You're just making this stuff up. Yeah, you're right, I am. I know the comparison is less than ideal, and an analogy only goes so far, but it's still just as crazy. Somehow, in the last 20 or 30 years, we have allowed our pop culture to change the meaning of marriage. If you want to create a label for gay and lesbian couples to fulfill some legal standing for property rights or custody of children, inheritance, taxes, and stuff like that's fine with me. Don't call it marriage. Civil union, common partnership, or something else. It's not marriage. Marriage is between a man and a woman through the entire history of the world. Now, this must be a common theme just lately, because I read a couple of articles in the Deseret News. One was by Linda and Richard Eyre. I may be pronouncing that wrong. It's E-Y-R-E. And essentially they use the same argument that you just can't redefine the meaning of words. And the other article was penned by Dan Peterson. He talks about the dangerous redefinition of marriage. And he uses this example from Abraham Lincoln. How many legs does a dog have if you call the tail a leg? 4. Calling a tail a leg doesn't make it a leg. The same thing is true for marriage. You just can't redefine the term. Now, the next word I'd like to talk about is pride. And I think this culture that we live in has redefined this word. In 1989, the prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Ezra Taft Benson, gave a talk called Cleansing the Inner Vessel. In this sermon, he said there would be 3 things that would be plaguing the sins of this generation. 1, sexual immorality. President Joseph F. Smith said that this would be one of the three dangers that would threaten the church from within. The second threat is giving heed to the teachings of the Book of Mormon. The third subject that it was of a grave concern for him was that of pride. I quote, "In the Scriptures, there is no such thing as righteous pride. It is always considered a sin. We are not speaking of a wholesome view of self-worth, which is best established by a close relationship of God, but we are speaking of pride as the universal sin." End of quote. Now here's a quote that applies to us today. Mormon, in the Book of Mormon, chapter 8, verse 27. And talking about the Savior coming again in his glory. And it says, "And it shall come in a day when the blood of saints shall cry unto the Lord because of secret combinations and works of darkness. Yea, it shall come in a day when the power of God shall be denied. The churches become defiled and lifted up in the pride of their hearts." They're talking about us. "Yea, even in a day when the leaders of churches and teachers shall rise in the pride of their hearts, even to the envying of them who belong to other churches." And again in the book of Doctrine and Covenants, section 38, verse 39, "And if ye seek the riches, which is the will of the Father to give unto you, ye shall be the richest of all people. For ye shall have the riches of eternity, and it must needs be the riches of the earth are mine to give. But beware of pride, lest ye become as the Nephites of old." Well, Brother Ned, how do you know that your interpretation is the correct interpretation? You've been talking about the different meanings of scriptures and who does what, and, well, how do we decide that what you're saying is right? Well, you just listen to the Spirit and see if it relates to you. Now, in 2010, President Dieter Uchtdorf, the second counselor in the First Presidency of the Church, gave a talk that reflected upon President Benson's talk concerning pride. I agree with President Uchtdorf's evaluation on the subject. However, I have a slightly different take on his characterization. One of the good things he does say is that all of God's children wear the same jersey. We're all on the same team. We're all the same. That was good. I like that. Now, President Uchtdorf has a little different take on what pride means. "Come on, Brother Ned. You know what I'm talking about. I'm proud of you, son. Great job. Oh, Mom, look at my report card. Aren't you proud of me? The few, the proud, the Marines." I get it. Believe me, I get it. In his talk, the President uses the example at the baptism of Jesus, where the Father says out of heaven, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." President Uchtdorf seems to be saying to me that that's an appropriate expression of pride. So let me go ahead and I'll rephrase it, and let's see if you can tell a difference. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Now let's go ahead and substitute the other words. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am very proud." Do you hear a difference? Well, let's do it again. And if you weren't paying attention the first time, pay attention now, because this could be important. You ready? Here we go. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am very proud." Do you hear a difference? I do. In being well pleased, there is an air of deep respect, honor, thankfulness. I don't hear any of that in being very proud. Easy, Brother Ned. You can't disagree with a member of the First Presidency. No, I don't disagree with his analysis of pride. We're on the same page on this principle. But, Brother Ned, aren't you proud of your church membership? No, I'm not. I'm grateful. I'm honored. It's a great blessing. Well, what would you say if your kids ask you if you're proud of them? Son, you did a great job. You bring honor to our family, and especially me as your father. Nobody talks like that. Now, use your own words. You don't have to use mine. If someone were to ask you if you are proud to be a Mormon, and you say yes, and you feel you are better than others who are not members of the church, you may want to give serious consideration to stop using the term pride as something that's good. There is no such thing as righteous pride. In all of the Holy Scriptures, pride or being proud is never talked about as something good. It's always a negative trait. So if the biblical standard on pride is never positive, should we adopt the cultural meaning or the scriptural meaning? Well, can't we have both? No, not me. I want no confusion when it comes to pride. We already have a whole bunch of idioms, homonyms, acronyms to make clarity a dense fog. Does that make sense? It makes sense to me. I think what I'm going to do is the next time I'm going to talk about things that are literal and things that are symbolic in the gospel. Black and white thinking. Oh, that's it. That's proof. Brother Ned's a racist. He's talking about how blacks and white are different and how they're not the same. No, that's not what I'm doing. Black and white thinking is a cultural idiom, a representation of all or nothing. I think we need to look at that. Some people have a black and white thinking mentality, and they don't look for areas of gray. They don't see areas of gray. We also might even talk about the basics of color, like hue and chroma strength and value and that kind of stuff. No, this isn't racism. It's not about their kind, whoever they are, and our kind. Primary colors are not black and blue. Although, if we fail to stop following the Savior, we can become familiar with the colors of black and blue as we continue to get bruised by following our own way instead of the Lord's way. Whoa, sounds like the ways of life are calling us back to take care of regular stuff, which means it's time for the Navy hymn, Eternal Father, Strong to Save, sung by Bonnie Scarsbrick, Sandra Schmidt, Stephen Hatch, and David Reese, four of the best people that I know who honor God and country. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your time.